Welcome to class. In last unit, we reframed responsibility. We said that responsibility is not the ability to produce the best-looking outcome, but the willingness to carry the cost of a decision without hiding it and without outsourcing it. If you accepted that idea, then you may also have noticed something else. Even when you try to do the responsible thing, you may still feel uneasy. You may still feel unsettled, replaying the decision in your mind again and again, and even when you know you did not lie or cheat. This unit is about that experience. There is a common expectation, especially among graduate students, that ethics should bring conclusion. Once you choose the right path, you should feel calm, confident, and resolved. But ethics does not work that way. So we're beginning with a reminder that may feel counterintuitive, but is essential. Ethics does not guarantee closure. Sometimes, even when you make the most responsible decision available to you, you still do not feel fully at peace. That is not necessarily a sign of failure. Sometimes, it is a sign that you are taking responsibility seriously. When people feel unsettled after a decision, they often interpret that feeling in one of the two ways. The first is guilt. If I feel uneasy, I must have done something wrong. The second is avoidance. This feeling is unpleasant, so I need to get rid of it. Both reactions are understandable, and both are misleading. In this unit, we separate three things that often confused: guilt, anxiety, and moral residue. Guilt is the feeling that comes from believing that you violate your own standards. Anxiety is fear about consequences or judgment. Moral residue is different. It is a discomfort that remains not because you choose wrongly, but because the situation forces you to give something up. Moral residue says, I made a defensible decision, but I still do not like it, what it cost. In research, this feeling is common because many decisions involve trade-offs that cannot be erased. Feeling unsettled maybe mean you notice that cost instead of denying it. Our goal here is not emotional support. This is not about therapy or feeling better. The goal is ethical interpretation. In research, there is a strong temptation to eliminate discomfort quickly by changing the story you tell yourself. You do not change the ideas. You do not change the data or break the rules. You adjust your internal narratives so tensions fades. Over time, this becomes a subtle form of ethical trade-off. Rationalization replaces reflection. So there is the simple calm. Unsettled feelings are not automatically a problem. Sometimes they are information. They signal that something mattered, and a responsibility was real, and that cost was carried. If you always feel perfectly fine after every decision, there is not necessarily maturity. It may be numbness or a habit of explaining discomfort away. Ethical maturity does not mean never feeling unsettled. It means remaining honest when you do. Let me offer a decision snapshot. Imagine you are submitting a manuscript, a thesis, a chapter, or a presentation. You believe you act responsibly. You documented limitations, use cautious language, and avoid exaggeration. You stayed within the red lines. And yet, after submission, you still feel uneasy. Not because you lied or cheated, but because you know the constraints you face. You know your data were imperfect. You know some analyses were not feasible. You know the timeline forced you to close decisions earlier than you want. Later, someone built up on your work. They cited it and treated it as solid. You noticed how easily your findings could be interpreted more strongly than you intended. You begin to wonder, did I emphasize the limits enough? Did I make the boundaries clear enough? Should I have paid a higher price to protect the interpretations? This is not a simple good. It is a recognition that responsible decisions have consequences that you cannot fully control. This feeling matters because misinterpretation will make it lead to problems. If you treat moral residue as good, you may become paralyzed or concluded that ethical research is impossible. That leads to cynicism. If you treat moral residue as something to erase, you may rationalize more aggressively. You may say, I disclosed it somewhere. No one complained, or everyone does it. Each statement sounds reasonable, but together they push ethical cost out of sight. Once that happened, the next trade-off becomes easier to hide. Discomfort fades, not because responsibility was carried, but because it was dismissed. Ethical maturity is not just about making good decisions. It is also about how you live within that remains afterwards. So, let's name the core idea of this unit. Ethical maturity is not absence of discomfort. Ethical maturity is the absence of denial. It means you do not use your rationalization to put yourself to sleep. You do not treat common practice as an escape from responsibility. And you do not confuse no one noticed with nothing mattered. This does not mean you must suffer or punish yourself. It means that when discomfort appears, you do not immediately erase it. You ask, what is might pointed to? Sometimes it will point to a cost you carried honesty. Sometimes it will point to something you soften or make less visible because it was uncomfortable. In both cases, the feeling has ethical value. In research cultures that rewards confidence, speed, and clean stories, ethical maturity often looks like staying transparent, even when it feels risky. Transparency does not always feel reassuring. It can expose. But exposure is different from wrongdoing. If you feel unsettled after making responsible decisions, do not immediately conclude that you failed. It may simply mean you do not turn away from the cost. So, let me close this takeaway. In research ethics, some decisions will never fully resolved. Someone will leave moral residue not because you did something wrong, but because no perfect option has ever been existed. The goal is not to eliminate that residue. The goal is to prevent it from turning into denial. Sometimes on this is evidence that ethics still present. End of story.